And the rest now, we destroyed it. And it said that Samuel started explaining to him. He said, God chose you when you were not an important person. You're out here looking for your father's herds. He made you king over these people. And Saul says, yeah, I've obeyed the voice of the Lord and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, and have brought Agag, the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took some of this to sacrifice to the Lord. They want to sacrifice it to God. Now here's a famous statement right here. It ought to be printed and put on the wall. Here's what Samuel said to Saul. Oh, and I'm not going to be able to get it read at the end of this tape. I'll come back to it in the next discussion. I wish I could have gotten it in, but my time's run out right there. We'll come back to it. I was about to read to you what Samuel said to Saul after Saul basically argued with Samuel and said, yes, I have obeyed God, but the people now, they brought back the sheep and the oxen, some things to be offered as a sacrifice to God. When God had told Saul to have them destroy everything down there. And now here's the answer that Samuel gave. He asked Saul this question. Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because thou hast rejected the word of the Lord, he hath also rejected thee from being king. As I had said in the last part of our previous discussion here, we would do well to make a copy of that and hang it up on the wall somewhere. We can profess to be great followers of Jesus and his Father. We can offer up praise and do a lot of things. But he says here, and indicates that God had rather have us to pay attention to what he says, to hearken, and do what he says, than to offer up whatever sacrifices we might offer, whether it's the back at that time the burnt offerings and whatever. Rebellion is a sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. You want to hear it one more time, the part up there? Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams. This is the principle that I am trying to get the listener to understand. And again, if I've misunderstood it, I'm sorry. If somebody can show me the error, I would appreciate it. But all these things that I've been showing you say to me, the way I read it, that when God tells us to do a certain thing in a certain way, we dare not make a substitution, offer an innovation, or have the stubbornness and rebelliousness of heart and say, I don't think your way is going to work, Lord. We're going to have to do something different. That scares me. And there's, I'm afraid, worlds of good, honest people that think they're doing a good thing. But they have abandoned the way that God has set forth and substituted something else. We'll look at it a little bit more here. There's the case of King David after Saul here decided to move the Ark of the Covenant. We're going to take it up to Jerusalem. You can find that in 2 Samuel chapter 6. 2 Samuel chapter 6. God had told Israel how they were to transport that ark. You have to go back to Numbers to get that. You can find it back in Numbers chapter 4 and verse 15. The way that they were supposed to do that, I won't turn over to that. Numbers chapter 4, he tells them how, when they were going to move that tabernacle, told them the priests were to go in there, and just certain ones of them. Aaron and his sons, I believe. And they start taking down all these curtains and stuff, and they'd cover up the Ark of the Covenant with different things, and wrap everything up. And that ark was a box, a certain size, and it had rings on each side of it. And they had some shafts or poles run through those rings, and the priest were supposed to carry that ark with those poles. I assume it took 4 men, one on each end of the pole, and they carried it. Well, I don't know why, but when David decided to move it, he had them put it on an ox cart. Apparently they got it on there somehow, properly. Maybe the priest might have carried it with the shafts or whatever. I don't know. They got it on the ox cart somehow without touching it. The unqualified or the unauthorized people touch it. And they're going along. Let's see if I can find the exact verse here. Let's see, 1 Samuel 6 and verse 6. Let me look at that one. Yeah. It said they came to a fellow's threshing floor there, and a man by the name of Uzzah, he was one of them that were going along driving the ox cart with the ox and the pulley, and most of the time, what I know a little bit about it, they'd walk along beside of the cart and walk along one side of the oxen, and the oxen would follow the man that was their leader, their caretaker. But anyway, they says here that the oxen stumbled, and it shook the ark on the cart, and no doubt Uzzah thought it was going to fall off, and he threw his hand up to catch it, and when he touched it, died, just like that. Again, I confess to you, my human nature says, Lord, the man didn't mean no harm by it. No. But because King David was not having the ark transported like he should have, then he put this other man in danger, and when the fellow threw his hand out and touched it, he died. Because God had told him, no, he said in the past, he told him, don't touch it. And he told him how to transport it. But, and all of King David's wisdom, for whatever reason, he said, well, we're going to haul it on an ox cart. And it cost that man his life. I think we need to give some real serious consideration to the effect that starting all these churches and organizing them like people are doing and have been doing for years, we need to consider what kind of effect that's having on the world and the people that observe this. I'm fearful that we're going to be in danger of causing people's souls to be lost. There's another similar example that I've talked to you about before. It's found in 1 Kings 13 about the young prophet. And I'm not going to be as detailed in this as we have been in the past. You can read about it in 1 Kings chapter 13. There was a young prophet that God sent from southern tribes after the divided kingdom up to the northern tribe to prophesy against the altar and the proceedings that were going on up there under the leadership of Jeroboam, who was the king of the northern tribes. God told him, told that young prophet, said, when you go up there, you go on this business that I'm sending you on, and you pronounce the proclamation against that altar and tell them what's going to happen. And when you turn around to go back home, well, before you turn around, he said, don't you eat a thing or drink a drop of water there. You turn around and get back out of there and come back a different way than the way you went. If I remember that last part correctly, I think so. And we got up there, and the king was offering a sacrifice on that very altar that he was going to prophesy against. And when he made his proclamation, and told them what was going to happen, that the altar was going to split open, the ashes would fall out and so forth, and that someday there'd be men's bones burned on that thing and so forth. And the king said, "Get him." Stuck his hand out like that, and his hand dried up, and he couldn't draw it back in. So Jeroboam was pleading there with that prophet to ask God to heal his hand, and he did, and God healed his hand. And he offered a big lot of wealth to that young prophet. Said, "You come with me over to my castle here, my palace," and said, I'll give you a big reward for healing my hand." That man said, "I'm not a-going. I wouldn't go up there if you give me half of your kingdom. God done told me not to eat nor drink in this place, and I'm going back like he told me to." And then it's amazing, but the record says that he started back, and an old prophet up there, I never have understood it, why the man would have wanted to do that. He went up there and met that young fella, and he said, "Come on, go up to the house and eat and drink and rest a while, and then go on away." He said, "I can't do it. So God told me not to eat a bite here and drink water, just to get on out of here." And that man said, "Well, God done told me, no." Said, "All right, for you to come up to my place." And that poor young man believed that old feller, and he went up there, and he was sitting there eating and drinking, and God caused that old man to prophesy and tell that young fella, said, "You'll never make it back home because you didn't listen to what I told you." And sure enough, he started back. The old fella gave him a donkey to ride on. And he was going along there, and a lion come out and killed him, didn't bother the donkey, and just standing there on the road over the body when the people came by and found it. They went and told the old man, and he went rushing out there, and there they got him, and he had them to bury him, and the old fellow seemed to grieve over it. I never have understood it. And he said, "Whenever I die," I said, "put me in the grave, in the tomb there where you've put this feller's bones." Sad and pitiful story. But again, we see, as we have seen time after time after time, that when God tells us to do a certain thing a certain way, we better do it. And here's a case where a poor man was deceived by a man claiming to speak on behalf of God, but speaking contrary to what God had said to the young man. And I don't know how you could have a better illustration. Dear listener, God has told us, we can read right here in these writings, especially in Acts and the epistles, we can read that God, Jesus Christ said, "I will build my church." And God adds to the church daily those that are being saved. This thing that we call, the King James calls the church, it's nothing but an assembly, a gathering of people that God is calling out of the world by the gospel. And every time somebody's saved, God puts them in there. And there's plain, and we're going to get to it, Lord willing, there's plain teaching on what they did and how they did it, going about doing what God wanted them to do. But I can't find any authorization anywhere in those writings where God had people start up their own churches and give them names and set up worldwide organizations and operate them like businesses and so forth and so on. Beloved, it's not there. And the only way that I know that we can justify doing that and make excuse for doing that is to say, I didn't use the right word, shouldn't have said justify doing it. The only way we can make excuse for doing it is saying, well, it just doesn't make any difference. But everything I read leads me to the conclusion that when He's told us and showed us how to do it, that's the way we need to do it. And when we decide to substitute something else or go a different way, don't mean to make it rhyme, but somebody's going to pay. And that's the way it looks to me. So I'm just putting this out for your consideration. And you, as I keep saying, you'll have to study that for yourself. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to try to find the very best that I can, the way God wants us to do things, and when He said how He wants it done and what He wants done, I'm going to try my very best to follow what He says that we ought to do. Well, let's see what else we've got left here. I want to talk now about the reason that God sent that young prophet up there to prophesy against that altar. We've got just about 10 minutes left here on this tape. Let's see if I can cover that in that time. Call your attention now, 1 Kings chapter 12. We'll back up just a little bit here in the record. When Solomon died, King Solomon died, he had a son named Rehoboam. And Solomon left the kingdom to his son. But Solomon had been hard on the nation, worked them hard, and taxed them heavily. And the people told Solomon's son, said, listen, if you'll give us a little slack here, if you'll ease up on us a little bit now, we'll take you as our king and honor you and respect you and do what you tell us. But now we're tired of this yoke that your daddy's put on us. And Rehoboam was young, and he took the advice of the older men first, and they said, yeah, I said, speak soft to the people, treat them right. And then he went and talked to the young people, young advisors, and they said, nah, tell them you're going to be tougher than your daddy was. You're a big man. So he spoke harshly to them, and 10 of the tribes said, I'll tell you what, we're through with you. And they left, and a fellow named Jeroboam became their leader. And it's amazing now what takes place here up in the northern kingdom. Let me start. I'm going to try to spend a little time on this one because I've not talked with you about it before. I'm starting verse 28. No, I better get 26 with it, I guess. They're up in the northern part of the kingdom now, and the law of Israel required all the tribes to go down to Jerusalem in Judea so many times a year for certain feasts and ceremonies there at the temple. And Jeroboam gets to thinking about this, and he says, now, if these people go back to Jerusalem to offer these sacrifices and stuff, as God has instructed, they're gonna be led back to the southern kingdom, and I'll read to you right here. It says, and Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam, king of Judah. He says, I can't afford to let these people go down there. So here's his plan. Verse 28, whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Now, I'm going to stop right there because I won't get it a piece at a time. Fred will run out of time. Maybe I won't. First thing he does, he appeals to the people's lazy, indifferent, don't care attitude. He said, it's too much for you to go all the way back down there every year. I'm going to fix it where you won't have to do that. And then, I'm going to have to take the time. In Amos chapter 6 and verse 6, there's a passage. We'll just have to deal with it here. I know you're getting in a big hurry and ruin a good thing. I'm going to try to find Amos here when I'm talking about this matter of people being indifferent and have a don't care attitude. Joel, Amos. Amos chapter, let's see, 6 and 6. I'm going to start back here, verse, better go back, verse 4, I'm sorry. Amos chapter 6, verse 4 beginning. Talking about these people that lie upon beds of ivory. This is talking to the nation of Israel now. And stretch themselves upon their couches, and eat the lambs out of the flock, and the calves out of the midst of the stall. That chant to the sound of the viol, and invent to themselves instruments of music like David. That drink wine in bowls, and anoint themselves with the chief ointments. Now watch him. But they are not grieved for the affliction of Joseph. Therefore now shall they go captive with the first that go captive. The nation was in moral degradation. They had turned away from the real God, worshiping idols, and been going down for a long time. And Amos prophesies against these people that were living it up. They had it good, the very best. Eat, drink, and be merry. Everything's going to be all right. They were not concerned. They did not grieve over the departure of the nation, of God's chosen people from their true God. Woe unto you, he said. You'll go with the first bunch of captives that leave. So that was the first thing that Jeroboam did. He appealed to the don't care attitude of the people. It's too much for you to go down there. Now the next thing he did, I've got to go back now, if I can find my place, to 1 Kings 12. Should have kept my finger on that. We'll find it. 1 Kings 12. There's chapter 10, 12. Next thing you said, he said, first of all, like I said, it's too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Then he says, he'd made these two calves out of gold. And he said, behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And he set the one in Bethel and the other in Dan. And this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one, even unto Dan. Went in both places. So the next thing that I suggest to you that Jeroboam did was he proclaimed the big lie, I'm going to call it. Had these golden calves made. He said, here's the gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt. Can you believe it? They always said, if you're going to tell a lie, tell a big one. And these people just accepted it. Went right on. Beloved,